Hi to le monde. Hello. This is Cher Weaver speaking. I'm the artistic co-director of Propeller Dance with Renata Suter. And I'm a white settler with brown eyes, brown hair. I use the pronouns she and her. And I identify as a dance artist with lived experience in mental health, or a mad dance artist. And I'm speaking today to you in my very small home office in Gatineau, Quebec. And our presentation today is being hosted from my location in Gatineau, Quebec. And it's the traditional, still unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory of the Kitchissippi, Omama Winine, Anishinaabe people, who are the past, present, and future stewards of our land. And I thank them for welcoming us all to live and dance and create and gather here across Turtle Island. So this is our second digital presentation in our Pan-Canadian Dance Digital and Disability Project. And as you know, we have presenters coming from all kinds of worlds: haptic technology, virtual reality, inclusive education. And I just want to thank again our creative partners who are here today. So the National Access Art Center, All Bodies Dance, Janelle, Being Studios, and Joe, Jack, and John. And I'd really like to just extend a huge warm welcome to Laurel Lawson, who is our guest today. And Laurel is a choreographic collaborator, dancer, designer, engineer with Kinetic Light. And she's the primary costume and makeup designer and contributes other technical and production design, and has designed the wheelchairs that she and Alice use in her performances. And she's mostly known for her performances in Kinetic Light. And some of you here have seen the piece. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. She's the product designer and lead for access and software initiatives, such as Automance, which is the company's app, which revolutionizes audio description for non-visual audiences. And Access Always, the paradigm and collective practices for holistic, disabled-led accessibility. And Laurel is a multiple skilled person. She has a ton of experience. She is also the CTO and co-founder of Psycore Systems, which is a boutique engineering consultancy firm, which specializes in solving novel, multi-realm problems of all sizes for a global clientele. And she's also a member of the USA Women's Sled Hockey Team. So she does a multitude of work. I met her about 15 years ago myself at a workshop, and I'm just so happy to have her here with us today. So welcome, Laurel.
Thank you, Shara. What she's not mentioning about our meeting at that workshop is that we spent a great deal of time arguing. It was a very fun week in Seattle, and we had an amazing time dancing together and arguing about principles, which I am delighted that has led to our continued association over the years. So I'm very happy to be with you all today. Uh, my name is Laurel Lawson. My pronouns are she or they. I am a white disabled woman with very pale skin, currently a little pink from the sun, hair buzzed short at the moment, some green glitter eyeshadow, and behind me is a plain white wall and a white shaded window. I hail from Alatsei, and I make my home in the meeting grounds of Novia Odalv. As Shara shared, I'm a dancer, a choreographer, and an artist engineer. And the way that I define that term is that I explore new ways of creating art with technology, through technology, and ways that we can use tech to display or enhance the experience of art. So today I want to share a little bit about some of the work I've been doing in research and design over the last few years, largely through the purview of kinetic light, uh, and of course intensively within the last year and more uh, in the time of pandemic, as not we, but as the rest of the world has caught up to the idea that decentralized participation is not only allowable, not only important, but potentially equitable. Um, and I use that term decentralized very purposely as opposed to remote, because remote says that there is a center and there is an outside, whereas decentralized suggests that we can share, uh, that we can share place rather than having a hierarchy of, well, this place is better than this place. If you have to be remote, you have to, but it's not the same. And for this same reason, I tend to avoid the word inclusion, because inclusion can also have that sense of hierarchy, of someone is doing the including and someone is being included. And all too often, the person doing that including is the person all the way in the center. And thank you, Jamie. Let me see if I can adjust my mic volume a little bit here. Okay, hopefully that's a bit better.
Yes.
So some of you I've met previously. Hi, David. Many of you I don't know. I'm hoping that today I can invite all of us to be in conversation. So this is very informal. If you have questions, as Kate said, please jump in, drop those in the chat, raise your hand, and let's take this where we would all like, want, need it to go today. I want to really talk about the role of technology and art, and specifically, of course, disabled artists, from a couple of different angles. Much of my particular work as a choreographer and as a technician revolves around disabled embodiments. And if that term is not something you've encountered before, I define embodiment as one whole, complete, and unique body, way of moving and being in the world. So, for example, as a wheelchair user, one of my embodiments is wheeled. My body thus consisting of flesh and bone and skin, and also metal and carbon fiber and nylon, is one whole and complete unit. If I'm working on the floor away from my wheelchair, then that is also a whole and valid embodiment. If I am working on crutches, then that is yet another. So I have 2 to 3 embodiments that I primarily work in for dance forms. The key for this, to me, is that each of these are equally valid, and each involves a distinct and material change. So, for example, a standing dancer going to the floor and then standing again would not be a change in embodiment because there is no fundamental reconfiguration. So this is one place where I think we need to strongly consider the role of technology for the disabled artist. Wheelchairs are a straightforward example. Prosthetics are also perhaps an easy way to think about this. What happens when we apply this to a walker? What happens if we apply this to a hearing aid? Is there a line between the kinds of technology that we want to take in and claim as parts of us, as integral, important parts of our being, versus maybe kinds of technology that we do not want, that we want to separate ourselves from, or say, this is me and this is the tech I am using, but they are not the same thing? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's an interesting question. I'm going to take a little pause there so we all catch up. And if anyone has any thoughts or feelings that you want to share, feel free to jump in. Okay, moving on. One aspect of research that we've been conducting with kinetic light over the last really 2 years revolves around this very intimately in the nature of chair design. So there are a couple of priorities to look at. First, of course, you have to think about functionality. The way that I'm considering designing chairs at this point in time as part of bodies has very little to do with rolling on 4 wheels on the floor. I mean, that's kind of what wheelchairs do, right? We know what they look like. We know how they go. They go with 4 wheels down. Well, that's not super interesting to me. As a dancer, I no more want to spend all my time with 4 wheels on the floor than a standing dancer might want to spend all of their time walking, putting one foot in front of the other. There's a place for pedestrian movement, uh, but perhaps not all the time. So, functionally looking at the ways in which we can move from this very flexible design to permitting very useful balance points that allow you to go not only to two wheels, but to one wheel in ways that are structurally sound. And for the wheelchair users here, if you have done a great deal of technical work with side tilts, you may notice that that puts kind of an odd stress on your wheel and on the axle. You may even have bent axles because they're mostly just not designed to do that. So that's one set of considerations. The functional ability to do the kind of movement we want to do. Uh, Possibly more interesting, though, is when we take pictures or we create renderings and have people give feedback about the appearance of it, is how we craft these elements of our bodies in a way that creates a certain response from the audience. Because as artists, that is a lot of what we're doing. The art that we're making is designed to create certain kinds of responses. So throwing this out as a thought that our crafted embodiments, how do we choose what kinds of responses we're getting? How do we get to the point where we know that we are accurately provoking those responses, which is part of honing one's craft? And I will note that much of what we found in the research was not intuitive. One thing you might have expected, curved lines were generally better received than straight lines or angles. They were seen as more organic, more fluid, and therefore more readily accepted by the non-disabled eye as being part of a body. One thing that I personally did not expect is the role of decoration. There's a phenomenon in design and in user research where you say, you know, look at what people do, not what they say. Because people will tell you that they want one thing, and people genuinely think they're not lying. You know, they think, oh, well, this is what I would do. But then when they actually do it, they do something different. And that was something that very much came up with the role of decoration, whether that be color or design. Has anyone ever gotten the question about, oh, well, why don't you costume your wheelchair? Or have you ever thought about, you know, making cloth covers for your crutches? I know that that's a question that I get asked frequently at performances. And that was something that people really said, oh, well, this would help me accept this would help me realize that this is meant to be purposeful. And that's not what we actually got in viewings of performances, because it presented, here's this thing, here's this costume piece, and here's this person sitting in the chair. That it actually, we were able to use research questions that got at the fact that people were separating us from our chairs in a way that wasn't desirable. So that was one very interesting finding for me. Yeah, I see a couple of notes in the chat that service dogs could be considered. Absolutely. I do know people who perform with their service dogs on stage who consider the dog to be part of their working embodiment. Which is fascinating, particularly in the kind of sublimation of the dog and the handler into a functional unit. So another aspect of this is, how does technology actually become part of our art form? Beyond being part of our bodies, which obviously is going to have a different relationship for dancers, where our bodies are physically themselves the medium of the art. Okay, next, what happens when we use technology as part of the art itself? And I want to give an example here having to do with dissent. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, which I have no idea if anyone has or not, Dissent is a piece that takes place on a ramped set. There are multiple slopes, there are curves, there are platforms, there are continuous and discontinuous areas. But part of what we wanted to find out, there is a phenomenon in dance of kinesthetic empathy. This gets down to, dance is actually a kinesthetic art. Dance is not a visual art. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But there's some fascinating research that when someone is watching dance, their own body actually responds. So if you see a dancer jump and you have access to your legs, the muscles in your legs will actually unconsciously twitch as if you are yourself jumping. That is a really, really critical element to understanding the way that audiences react to different kinds of dance. What this means for the gap between a disabled performer and a non-disabled audience member, though, or more simply, for a performer and an audience member who have fundamentally different embodiments, it means that that kinesthetic empathy is broken. So as a wheelchair user, I don't have a way to provoke that deep physical connection with someone in the audience because they have no experience of being on wheels. Their brain has no way to make that connection. What we found in Descent is by adding the element of a ramp, uh, by extending our stage into 3 dimensions, we were able to provoke some of that kinesthetic empathy through creating the sensation of speed, of falling, of rushing downhill. So rather than putting our test audience hooked up to EMGs with, with little readouts showing muscle activation, we found it was more useful to use heartbeat as a measure of how the audience was reacting. So where we went from this, of course, understanding this critical piece that we can reestablish kinesthetic empathy between audience members of different embodiments. And of course, this is not just about non-disabled audience members. This is deeply applicable to all of us because very few of us are going to have the same embodiment as each other. Even if we are solely working within the community of disabled artists, we all tend to have quite different embodiments. Even, for example, 2 wheelchair users are going to have different physical experiences. So that part is important. But moving forward from there, what we can do is take this information, for example, taking these heartbeat recordings of test audience members and then feeding that back in to, in this particular case, we fed it back in to audible components, such as the music, such as audio description content. And I'm going to pause there for just a second.
Laurel, there are a couple comments in the chat I wanted to bring your attention to. Moni has said, I have costumed my chair, and then follows up with, would the costuming of a chair be undesirable?
I think that totally depends on your artistic goal and understanding the response that you want your audience to have. I fall on the side of there is no good or bad or desirable or undesirable, but there is understanding your artistic goals. So if you want people to see your chair in a certain way, then that is a tool in your toolbox as an artist. When we were conducting that research, our particular artistic goal at that time was not to make our chairs go away. What we do not want to hear, oh, I didn't even see the chair. How many times have we all heard that one? Because that's not a legitimate, if you're not seeing my chair, what the hell are you looking at on stage? But our goal was to create one unified, to have people see flesh and see metal and understand that this is one thing, one body. So for that goal, the research data suggests that separately costuming or decorating our chairs was not desirable, because that led to people seeing two objects rather than one body. But yeah, it really, I mean, first define your goals. And once you know that, then you can figure out what tools to use to get that from the audience. Question from Janelle.
Yes.
How and why did you become involved in the art? What process did you use to grow your professional artwork? Oh gosh, this one is a long answer, Janelle. So I'll try to give you the short version, and maybe we can chat offline later, because this could easily be like the rest of our hour here. I began dancing professionally in 2004. I have performed since I was 5 years old as a musician. I moved into performing professionally in music quite young, as a child. And so I had actually intended to go to conservatory when I injured my hands through over-intensive piano practice. So I transitioned somewhat to theater, and primarily technical theater in college. And of course, I was also an elite athlete through this time period. So I began taking dance classes as an auxiliary to physical theater work. And eventually, Douglas Scott, who some of you know of Full Radius Dance, invited me to audition for the company, and I took up that in 2004. So I would say I had, in some ways, kind of this normative pathway of beginning training very early. In other ways, no, I had no dance training no serious dance training until I was an adult. And I came to professional dance as an adult, which many of us do. And it's quite a challenging process. I don't know that I can tell you much about those first few years of dancing professionally. My work has developed over, what are we at? 17, 18 years since then. I can tell you, when Shara and I first met in Seattle, I emphatically, there were people there pushing me to begin accepting choreographic commissions. And it's like, no, I am not ready. I am a dancer. Maybe someday I will be a choreographer. But at that point, I was still in that sort of primary training period. So it took quite a while, I think, for me to mature as an artist and to bring everything together in the way that it has been. So there's the short version. And yeah, if you have specific questions, happy to chat about the details later.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple more questions about shares. From Robert, when I was doing a piece about my Native heritage, I considered decorating a wheelchair with Native themed decorations, but the dancer in the wheelchair represented my Ottawa dance community and not my Native dance community, so I chose not to. Yeah, awesome point. I have my background is complicated in that regard, and as you may know, in the US, relations between Native communities and disability can be very challenging. So that is something that I have not personally looked into, or not something that I have personally ever considered. But yeah, I think it is very much a personal decision as the choreographer, and it sounds like the dancer in the situation. From Chana, I come from the burlesque world, and many disabled performers do decorate their access devices. Yes, that's been a significant process in the burlesque disabled artist community. And I've had some fascinating conversations about it. One thing that has jumped out at me is the extensive use of props in the burlesque community, and a number of artists have communicated with me that they are deliberately using their mobility devices not as an embodiment in the way that I use it in contemporary dance, but in the tradition and in the established technique of props within burlesque, and as well within the idea of stripping, of this being something that you are going to discard. So yeah, I think there's a important and nuanced discussion to be had about how that works through different techniques.
I believe Shara has a question. Go.
Yeah, I just wanted to invite, if anyone would like to ask questions without using the chat, feel free. This is very casual, and feel free to ask. I had a question about if you could maybe talk a little bit about oddments and what that is, Laurel, just for people that don't know. And this is all very exciting to me when I read about it.
I mean, that is exactly where I was going next. So, as it happens, no, she does not have my notes. So,
I didn't actually know that was the next part. Excellent.
So yeah, taking that research data and feeding it back into audio content is where I left off. So the third kind of realm, the third lens we can put on technology here, we've talked about tech as part of the body. We've talked about tech as an art form in and of itself. So tech as a medium, tech as a way to facilitate, enhance, deliver the art. And that is where Automance comes in. So let's have a little experience together. If you would like to close your eyes, or watch or listen for just a moment, I invite you to imagine a giant room, maybe a museum gallery or a big park or a church, some big space. And scattered throughout this space are many speakers. They can be anywhere. They can be hanging in the middle of the air. They can be mounted to the ceiling or in a tree. They can be in the corners, in the center of the room. And each one of these speakers is playing a different track. There's different content coming out of each source. But all of these tracks are part of one performance. So you come into the space and all the speakers begin playing, and you can choose what to listen to. You can weave your way around so that the content, the performance shifts and changes around you. You can find one speaker that you like and go cuddle up next to it and listen to it from beginning to end. You can find a place where you can hear 3 or 4 or 5 tracks all blended together. Shrink that down into a phone screen and you've got Automance. So this came about way back when Alice and I were doing very early showings of Descent. We did our first ever showing in San Francisco. And we knew we were making a good dance work. That wasn't really a question. What we didn't know, there are moments and movements and choreography in Descent that shows things that previously weren't really part of modern dance, things that are quite personal to us as disabled artists, like, for example, strapping and unstrapping in our chairs. So things like that, we weren't sure how that was going to be received by the disability community. We had some people going, oh, that's too private. That should be closely held. You can't show that to non-disabled people. So, we decided to have a showing, and we filled a theater with our community, our friends, our elders and teachers, our students. It was incredible. We had a theater filled with about 300 cribs. And for the most part, this went incredibly well. And the feedback was mostly really positive. We showed about half of Descent, which is where it was at the time. But after the show, some of our blind friends and artist colleagues came up to us and said, hey, we could feel people leaning forward in their seats, and we heard people gasping, and there just wasn't anything that exciting in the audio description. What was going on? We'd hired a very good audio describer for this. This was absolute best practice available at the time. but we knew we had failed because we had not delivered an equitable experience. The single stream of audio description coming through someone else's secondhand interpretation without choice of content was not equitable. So a lot of conversations, a lot of thinking, a lot of poking around and prototyping later. And I came up with the design for Automance to deliver a choiceful experience where you have agency over the content that you're listening to, in style, in type, in complexity. Just as a sighted audience member might choose to look at one dancer or look at the whole stage or even close their eyes. A system designed to deliver content which is created alongside the art, by the artist, as part of the art, that is not, we've made this and now we're going to have an audio describer watch it after the fact and create this retroactive version, but rather content that is inherently and immediately part of the art itself. Because remember, dance is a kinesthetic art form. Dance is not a visual art. There is no reason why we should prioritize seeing dance over listening to dance. And dance content that is as complex and aesthetically rich as what we can convey with bodies moving on stage. And some things that we've looked at in that regard include not only multiple styles of traditional description, from the kind of dry and clinical to the emotional or scene painting style and beyond, but tone poetry, soundscape, prose, essay form, discussion of the dance, screenplay of the story, actual body recordings or created recordings of both the dancer's breath and heartbeat and the audience members' heartbeats. The field is wide open in a lot of ways in the way that we can think about sonifying dance in this complex form. I know we're running a little short on time. I want to just make 2 points about this. So the term that I have come to use for this recently is multiplex access. In audio description, in particular, I use that to refer to multiple content tracks playing at the same time. And if you go to Kinetic Light's All Arts film that was released a few months ago, you can experience one version of that. Due to the production limitations, of course, we could not put it out with a full version, an Automance-like experience where you can choose what you're listening to, but there are multiple versions of Access, and the fully audio described version has a primary audio description track, auxiliary description tracks from the dancers, voiceover that is part of the film soundtrack, and music. So that's one example of multiplexing in the audio space. Also present in that is multi-ASL, where there are actually two distinct streams of ASL interpretation going on at the same time. The other point I want to make is that this is challenging for many audience members, and particularly non-disabled audience members. And this is one of the reasons why there are multiple versions. When we were first testing Automance in live performances of Descent, absolutely everyone wanted to try it. And I was keeping the number of people using it quite small to make sure that first, all non-visual audience members got absolute priority. And then if we had spaces left, I would let a few other people, a few non-disabled people who wanted to try it. No one who was fully sighted and who was not an audio engineer or sound professional made it more than 5 minutes into the performance, because the experience was sensorially overwhelming. So that suggests that there is, it's not a matter that some people are going to experience everything, but that we each have our set of experiences. And yeah, a lot of my work right now is around understanding how we can accommodate 100 audience members with 100 different sensory spheres with aesthetic equity. Again, could go on about that for a very long time, but I believe we are at the hour. Maybe we can run over just 1 or 2 seconds if there are questions, or I will be happy to chat with anyone over email, Instagram, as well if you have questions later.
Laurel, I just want to point out some of the comments. This person is so smart. I feel we could pick her brain forever. Mind-blowing presentation. Wow is right. It's, yeah, you've given us so much to think about, and you have so much expertise to offer. Dance disability technology, and I just thank you so much. And we does anybody have, like Laurel said, you know, you can connect with Laurel directly, or if you need her email, Alex, Rob, you know, if you'd like to talk to Laurel moving forward with your own pieces, like we can set you up to talk to Laurel. Does anybody have any last things that they'd like to say? That was phenomenal. You really opened up my senses in this presentation today.
If there are no last questions, thank you. I've been so happy to be here and be in space with you all today.
Well, on behalf of everyone, yes, I just echo what Shara has said, and thank you so much for joining us, Laurel. Thank you, everyone who's participated and who's come to this session today. So great to see you all, and thank our interpretation service providers. Thank you for your work. It's wonderful to have you here as well. Okay, so I guess then stay tuned. We will be doing more of these online presentations in the fall. We do not have a schedule set up yet, but we will be sure to inform you. We're anticipating maybe an October timeline, but we have lots of time to plan before then, and we will be in touch. So thanks again for your participation, comments, and all the information and experience that you shared with us, Laurel. We really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye,
Hi,
everyone.
Dan.
Thanks so much. Hi, thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, thank you for being here.
Bye.
Wow.
Morning, Claire. Thank you. Thank you, Carmel. Thank you, Shannon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe we'll turn the recording off here.
Mhm.